Oh hey there, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're returning to unit testing and we're learning to mock our data like a pro. So open up your laptop, spin up your favourite text editor and let's get writing some code. So before we get started, I'd like to take a minute just to familiarise ourselves with the project. As always, if you'd like to follow along at home, there is a link in the description to the GitHub repository. Now, the project that I've created is mostly housed in this component here. The theme that I've gone with is something like a finance app, a bit like Revolut or Monzo. Doesn't really matter what the theme is, it's just allowed me to write a load of methods and then write some tests to test them. If I open up my running panel down the bottom here, you can see that I've got 9 tests and all of them are passing at the moment. Now, the only other important set of files in here is in this folder here. We've got a load of models that we use throughout our component and our test file. So if we have a quick look at these tests, if you watched any of my other videos, they're pretty similar to all the tests you'd see in those. Currently, when we're mocking something, we think about what we'll actually need in our test. We'll create the most basic version of that object and then we're casting it as the type. Now, in most cases, especially when it's just you working on the code base, and it's quite a small code base, this is a great way of mocking your data in your tests. It's quick, it's efficient, and it means you're spending less time writing mocks and more time writing code. But I'm going to demonstrate an issue that you can run into doing it this way. And it's an issue you'll certainly run into if you're working in a large team where lots of people are working on different things at once, or with a really large complex code base. So let's minimize this a little bit so that we've got a bit more real estate on the screen here. So let's say as a developer, I've just been given a new user story where we're now adding permissioning to these wallets. So I need to add some new permission keys into the model and then a little bit of logic into the component. So let me jump across the component here. I've actually already put this logic in here and commented it out. Once again, it doesn't really matter what it's doing. All that matters is that we've got these new keys. So now I just need to jump into my wallet model and then we're going to uncomment this as well. If I save that, we're going to see that the tests are now going to fail. If we scroll up and have a little look at why they failed, it's because in our mocked test data that we made before, we hadn't made an allowance for this permissions key. So in our old way of mocking things, if we jump across to here, what I'd have to do is everywhere where I created a mock for a wallet, I'd then now have to go in and I'd have to add this new permissions key. And then you can see that gets out of hand really quickly because although we've only got 5 tests that are failing here, imagine if I had 100 tests that were failing here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to find a new way of mocking that covers 2 criteria. Firstly, our mocks need to return a default set of data that can be updated when new keys are added to a model. And secondly, we need to allow the developer to easily override any key in there so that each one could be unique for our tests. So to do this, we're going to create ourselves mock classes. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new file. If I go in here, we're going to follow the naming convention of giving it the name of the model .mock.ts. Open that up there. We need to open up our model and then we're going to close the rest of these files and hide away our menus for now. If we then go and put these side by side so we can see our mock and our model here. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go export. This is a class and it's got the name of permissions mock. Give ourselves a little bit of space in there and we're going to look at this super simple model. So the 2 things that I said that we needed to achieve in here is we need to set some default values and we need to allow the developer to update these values. So first of all, let's create ourselves our default object. We're going to make this a private variable because we're going to have a method that actually returns it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call it _data. You can call this whatever you want. It's just a naming convention that we tend to use at work. It's of type permissions model and it's going to equal an object. Now we need to give it the 2 keys that we've got here. So that's canEdit, and we're just going to give that a default value of true, and then the other key is canDisable, and we're going to give that a default value of true as well. Now for each of these values, what I want is I want a method that allows me to update that value. So if I go down here, I'm going to create my first method. It's a public method because I want to be able to call this from outside of the class. I'm going to say with, and then I'm going to put the name of our first property here. So with canEdit, it's going to take a value of canEdit. And that right there is a Boolean. And we're not going to add a return type just yet because I'm going to explain what we're going to return in a minute. But before that, I want to say this ._data.canEdit equals, and then it's just our passed in canEdit here. Now I want to do the exact same thing below for canDisable. So if I go with canDisable, this takes a parameter of canDisable as well, which is a Boolean. Once again, we're skipping the return type. Then we go this .data.canDisable equals canDisable. Now we need one more thing in here, and I mentioned this at the beginning, we need a method that returns this. So if we go down here, I'm going to create a public method again. As a naming convention, once again, I call this model. It can be called whatever you want. Now this returns of type permissions model. And then all we got to do in here is we need to say return this dot underscore data. So now that we've got this, I want to jump back into our spec file just so we can test what the output of this is. And what I want to do before I do that is I just want to comment this out so we don't have our failed tests clogging up our console. And then as I say, I'm going to jump into our spec file here. And at the top of one of these tests, all I want to do is I just want to console out that new mock that we just created. So if I go new permissions mock, now from here, we want to go dot model, and that, if we open up our console again, we will see should spit out our default values that we put in there. So as you can see here, console log, and we've got our default values. Now that's a great first step, but as I said before, our remit was, as a developer, I want to be able to update these values easily. And really the way that I want to update them is using chaining, so I want to be able to go in here with can edit, and then I just want to pass in my value here. Now that's not going to work until we make a slight change. So if I jump back into my mock file here, and remember how I said that we need to set a return type here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to be a return type of permissions mock. Then all I'm going to do is here, I'm going to say return this. Now what this means is I'm returning the context of this class, which basically means at the end of this method, I'm passing in this class again, which allows me to chain another method off of it. So if I do the same thing here, we go permissions mock, and then down here, once again, I go return this. Now when we save this, what we can see is my value has been changed here because I've changed through this with method. Now I can chain as many of these on as I want, so I can say with can disable, and I can set that to false as well. When this comes back, both of them will be false. Awesome, so we've got our first mock here. But that hasn't solved our issue, because our issue was actually with our wallets model. So if I comment this back in and I click save, we're once again going to have our 5 errors. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did a minute ago with our permissions mock, but we're going to do it with our wallets model. So first of all, I'm going to create myself a new file in here, which is going to be our mock class. And I'm going to call that wallet.mock.ts. I'm then going to open up my wallet model, move that over here. And once again, I'm going to hide my menus to give us a bit more space to work. Let's close this one and this one, and we're going to move this to the end here so it's easier to see. First things first, we need to export our class. It's going to suggest the name for us, which is wallet mock, which is correct. Then we're going to give ourselves a bit of space in here. Now, this model is much bigger than the previous model we made. So we're going to use every trick in the book to try and make this process a bit quicker. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select each of these keys. I've got 9 keys there, so I need to create my private underscore data object that is of type wallet model. And in here, I'm going to give myself 9 lines. I'm going to select all of these lines here. This can be done much quicker in VS Code, where you can just drag up and select a load of lines. I'm going to add my keys in, and for now, because we haven't set the default values, I'm just going to give them all null. We can go and do the default values in a minute. Now next up, we need to do our with methods. Once again, I'm going to select 9 lines. I'm going to go public with, we're going to paste in our key names here. We're going to have to fix the casing in a second. They all take a parameter. Now to get the types for these, we can do a little cheat. We're going to add our wallet model in here. We're going to use square brackets, and then we're just going to name the key inside, and that's going to infer the type from that model. Then all of these return the wallet mock because we want to do the chaining. We add our curly brackets in here. We go this dot underscore data dot add our key in equals the key that's passed. And then finally we go return this. Now I'm going to go down here and just fix our spacing a little bit. And then finally we need to create our public method down here that is public model, returns our model type, and then return this dot underscore data. Now the only thing, as I say, that we have to do to clean these up is we're going to step through each of these and uppercase these as we go. Now obviously this has taken me a little bit longer because I'm going slowly because I'm talking you through it as well, but as you can see, if I was just whizzing through this, it's much quicker than not using the multi-line select with alt click. Now all I've got left to do is I've got to fill in my default values. So I've actually got a method in this project that creates me IDs, so I'm going to use that. But you could use anything here. You could use Faker, you could just put in a random ID. I just like the idea that each of my wallets that are created will be assigned a random ID unless I override it. Next up, I'm just going to give it a name, my wallet. And then for my currencies, we can see in the model that I actually use a currency enum. So I'm going to say that my currency is JPY by default and my base currency is USD. My balances I'm going to leave as null because we're going to have to create another mock for these in a minute. And then I'm just going to say that this is false. Now our latest transactions are actually an optional parameter, which means we shouldn't be passing it in our default values. And with our permissions, we can use the mock we just created. So we go new permissions mock, and we just want to use its model. We need to make sure to import this above. And now to test this, let's jump back into here, delete these out. And then all we want to do is change this to wallet mock and import that at the top. Once again, I want to comment this code out because I don't really care about the failed tests just yet. If we look at our tests again, we let these run. We can see now that we've console logged out. We've got our random ID here, and then everything else is our default values that have been put in. Now, as I said before, we can overwrite any of these values. So say I didn't want a random ID, I could go in here and I could go with ID and I could pass in wallet1. Save that. And we can see that when our tests pass, we've got the same again here, except for the ID is now wallet1. So now if I comment back in our offending bit of code, so that we get our 5 failed tests again, I'm going to get rid of this. And then all we're going to do is we're going to find every instance of where we mock our wallet class in here, and we're going to replace it with a new wallet mock. So I'm going to do a find in here, and I'm going to look for as wallet model. Now we can remove these and replace them with our new wallet mock. Each of these I've given a unique ID to, but the ID that I've given them doesn't actually matter in the test, so I'm not going to bother passing in a custom ID. So all I need to do here is go new wallet mock, and then we need to tell it to return the model. I'm going to literally copy this, and for these ones I'm just going to paste this over the top of each of those. We're going to continue stepping through our code here, and now we've found slightly more complex mocks here. So if I put this here for a second and we say new wallet mock, now we need to pass in this balance in base currency. So if I go with balance in base currency, and I'm just going to take this for now, and I'm going to put it in here. And then let's not forget that we need to tell it that it's the model. Let's delete this code out of here. And we can see that we've got ourselves a little error here. Now this error is because we're passing in one value and it's expecting 2. So this tells me we need to create another quick mock. So I'm going to create another file here, and this mock is for our amount type. So I'm going to say amount mock.ts. So if we go export class amount mock, we need to create our variable for our default values in here. This has our 2 default keys in here, and they can both be 0 for now. Now I need to take both of these, alt click them, and then once again go public with use our little trick in here, return the amount mock, and then we've got one more method that we need to add into here, which is our model method. Now if we clean this up and sort out the casing here, that's our mock completed. So now if we jump back across into our wallet mock class, we can now go to here and we can say new amount mock, and we just want to use the default values in that method there. Import that, and then we can copy this and paste it here. So now if we jump back into our test here, we need to take this value, and then we're going to replace all of this with our new mock. So new amount mock, and then we want to say with actual balance, we're going to put in the value that we just cut from there, and then we want to tell it that we're using default values other than that. Now that we've got this, we can do the same thing for each of these. So if I take this from each of them, We're going to replace this, and then this value was 0.001. Replace this, and this is minus 0.01. And there's a couple more here to do. I'm going to copy this one onto my clipboard so I don't forget it. And then we're going to paste this value that I just copied into there. And then copy this. And then the final one is pretty simple here. We can just make this 0. If I save that, our test should start coming through as passing again. Now going forward as a developer, if I need to add a new key to my model, all I need to think is I just need to go add a new default value into my mock, and then all my tests should still pass. And with that, that's everything that I wanted to cover in today's video. As I say, you might not use this in every use case, but certainly when it comes to complex data, I'd suggest following a mocking route like this. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to subscribe. And if you've got any questions, leave them down below and I'll comment straight back. Other than that, take care of yourselves.